It was a crisp autumn evening in Moscow, a night when the energy of the city hummed in the air and the lights of towering buildings reflected off the wet streets like thousands of stars. The streets were alive with the rhythm of hurried footsteps, the hum of cabs, and the occasional rumble of a passing subway train. The night was both ordinary and extraordinary, as it always is in a city where everything can change in an instant. A cold breeze swept through the alleys, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of fall leaves and the promise of winter. Among the sea of busy people, one figure stood out. Habib Nurmagomedov, former UFC champion and national hero, walked the streets of Moscow looking every bit the champion he once was. Dressed in a simple black hooded sweatshirt, dark jeans, and a pair of worn sneakers, Habib moved with the quiet confidence that didn't demand attention but naturally attracted it. His face was as calm and steadfast as ever, but there was a softness in his eyes, a calmness that came from knowing who he was and where came from. He wasn't surrounded by the usual entourage of bodyguards, reporters, or fans, just the hum of the city and the distant sounds of life going on around him. Despite being a world-famous figure with millions of fans, Habib preferred these moments of anonymity. No one recognized him, no one bothered him with questions, and no one treated him like a celebrity. It was a rare occurrence for Habib, but this evening he enjoyed the peace that the streets of Moscow afforded him. He was free to walk around, observe the world, and enjoy the quiet moments that were often overshadowed by the roar of the UFC arena. But even as he wandered the familiar streets, that evening there was a sense of something more, a pull toward a particular place. Habib wasn't entirely sure why he was here, away from the comfort of his home or the company of his friends. It felt like fate, like a chance encounter waiting to happen. He hadn't planned to stop, but something deep inside urged him to walk through the busy streets of downtown Moscow, past crowded restaurants, neon stores, and an endless stream of people. Finally, he found himself in front of a small, unassuming park, tucked between two towering buildings. The park, though quiet, was not completely abandoned. A few casual figures wandered in the shadows, people lost in their own worlds. It was at that moment, as Habib looked around, that he noticed him, a figure hunched and sitting on the cold stone bench by the fountain. A man who seemed older than his years, wearing tattered clothes that barely protected him from the increasing cold of the evening. His eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of something in them, perhaps hope or despair. Habib slowed his steps as he drew closer. The rustle of his footsteps on the fallen leaves was almost drowned out by the low hum of the city behind him. A homeless man, clearly in need of help, was curled up on a bench, clasping his hands together in a way that indicated either fear or coldness. Habib couldn't help but notice how loosely his clothes hung on him, worn and faded from years of use. His face was unshaven, and his long, tangled hair looked as if it hadn't seen a comb in months. Yet, despite his disheveled appearance, there was an undeniable humanity in the man's face, a man who had lived a hard life, but was still standing, still surviving. It was as if the moment had frozen in time. Habib stood still for a second, his gaze fixed on the man. He felt not pity, but something deeper. He knew the hardships. He had seen them with his own eyes in his life growing up in Dagestan. The struggles of his people, the poverty many faced, the constant battles against adversity. He understood what it meant to fight for survival. It wasn't about fame or wealth. It was about strength, resilience, and dignity. Habib saw it all in the man in front of him. Just as Habib was about to walk past, the man looked up, catching his gaze. The two met gazes for a brief moment, and then, voice rough from years of suffering and neglect, the man spoke. "Excuse me, could you give me $1? "Just $1, sir," "I haven't eaten all day," he said. His voice was tinged with despair, but not without a drop of hope. It was a simple request, one that many people would have ignored or brushed aside. But in that moment, Habib felt something stirring inside him, a feeling that told him this wasn't just a chance encounter. It was more than that. There was a brief silence. The noise of the city seemed to subside, leaving only the two of them in the dim light of the park. Habib took his time answering, instead choosing to take a deep breath. His mind raced through memories of his own hardships, his rise to fame, and the countless people he had encountered in his life. But this moment felt different. There were no cameras, no fanfare, no spotlights. Just a man asking for help, standing in the shadows of a city that had long forgotten him. In that silence, Habib made a choice. He knew what he had to do. The atmosphere in the park froze as the words hung in the air. Habib stood only a few feet away from the homeless man, his eyes soft but determined. Asking for $1, a simple gesture of survival, might seem like an insignificant act to most, but to Habib it was more than a plea for help. It was a window into the struggles of ordinary people, a reminder of the hardships that so many people faced in silence, hidden beneath the bustling world of Moscow. Habib's gaze never once wavered. The man's voice cracked as he spoke, and Habib could see the weariness deeply imprinted on his face. This man hadn't known comfort or stability in years. He wasn't just asking for money. He was asking for a chance, a small lifeline that would get him through another day. Habib could feel the weight of this unspoken plea, a raw cry for help that many would have brushed aside without a second thought. The park, though quiet, was not entirely empty. A few passers-by strolled by, distracted by their own lives, unaware of the interaction unfolding before them. In that moment, however, it seemed as if the world stood still for a moment, as if the city itself had frozen to witness something far greater than any headline or sports victory. Habib, without a shadow of hesitation, knelt down to meet the eyes of the homeless man on his level. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he cast a long, measured look at the man, studying his face. Habib saw years of hardship reflected in the deep wrinkles that distorted his face, the marks of a life spent fighting battles no one else could understand. But Habib also saw something else, a resilience, a dignity, and strength that wasn't immediately obvious, but was undeniable. The man, unsure of Habib's intentions, fidgeted nervously on the bench. It seemed he couldn't believe what was happening. Habib had become the living embodiment of the unlikely, someone who, by worldly standards, had no reason to stop or worry. And yet, here he was, standing in front of this man, offering not only money, but his attention, his sympathy, and his time. $1, you say? Habib said quietly. His voice was steady, but with a warmth that immediately put the man at ease. You need more than that. The homeless man blinked, clearly surprised by Habib's words. There was a glint of disbelief in his eyes, as if he couldn't fully comprehend that someone of Habib's stature, someone who had made millions, who had become a worldwide icon, would stand here on a cold autumn night in Moscow and have this simple conversation with him. I don't have a lot of money, Habib continued in a calm and measured tone, but I can give you more than just $1. The man, whose voice trembled slightly, muttered, Yeah, I don't want to bother you, sir. I just need something to eat, something to sustain me. Habib nodded understandingly. He had heard countless stories like this one, stories of people forgotten by society, not remembered by those who had the means to help. He had grown up in poverty, and the sight of a homeless man was a stark reminder of the many lives that had fallen out of sight. But it wasn't just about charity. It was about recognizing the common humanity between them. It was seeing the person in front of them, not the circumstances they were forced into. Without another word, Habib stood up and began to reach into his pocket. The homeless man, still unaware of what was happening, watched silently. The sounds of the city continued to echo around them, but it seemed as if world had narrowed down to the two of them. Habib pulled out a thick wad of money, an amount much larger than $1. He counted out the generous sum and then, without hesitation, held it out to the man. "Take this," Habib said firmly. "It's yours." The man's eyes widened, his breath catching as he looked at the money in his hand. It wasn't just $1, it was enough to change his life, even if only for a short time. But it wasn't just the amount that took him by surprise. It was a pure act of kindness, a gesture that said, "I see you. You're important." But Habib didn't stop there. He saw the expression on the man's face change from shock to disbelief, and then, with a quiet sigh, Habib added, "But I'm not done yet." The homeless man's eyes flicked back to Habib, confused and stunned. Habib looked at him and waved toward the street. "Come with me," Habib said. "Let's get you something to eat. You've been starving for too long." It was a proposition that most would consider impossible. A man like Habib, who for years has not known nothing but fame and fortune, offering food to someone who has fallen out of society. But for Habib, this wasn't a moment of charity. It was a moment of human connection, a chance to reach out and show that kindness still exists, even in the busiest of cities. The homeless man, still in a daze, nodded slowly, unable to fully comprehend the change his fate. He stood up, hesitant at first, but Habib's presence was calm, guiding him forward. They walked together through the dimly lit streets. Habib led them to the nearest restaurant. The homeless man walked beside him, not quite believing what was happening, but inexpressibly grateful. Habib, always a quiet figure, walked without saying a word. His shoulders relaxed, his movements smooth. The streetlights flickered above them as they headed toward the warmth and comfort of a place that seemed worlds away from the cold bench they had just left. Habib had made a choice, and in doing so, he had not just changed one man's life. He had reminded the world that true greatness is not measured by titles or fame, but by the kindness we show to those who need it most. When the last bit of food disappeared from the homeless man's plate, he leaned back, eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and deep gratitude. The warmth of the food was still settling in his stomach, but what really filled him was something much more substantial: dignity. The simple act of being treated like a human being again, with respect and care, was something he hadn't experienced in years. It was almost as if he had been invisible to the world for so long, lost in the shadows of society's indifference. But now, as Habib sat across from him, he felt seen, not just by the world, but by someone who truly understood what it meant to fight. The man's voice was hoarse with emotion when he finally managed to speak. His words were barely a whisper, as if he was afraid they might ruin the delicate moment between them. Thank you so much," he murmured. His eyes filled with tears, which he quickly wiped away, not wanting to fully open up in front of Habib. "I don't know how to say this. No one has ever done anything like this for me." Habib, always modest, smiled softly. There was no pride in his smile, no sense of superiority. His smile was simply that of a man who had given away what he felt was the right thing to do without asking for anything in return. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. His voice was calm and soothing. "We all have our difficulties. No one is immune to them. But the most important thing in this world is how we treat each other." The words weren't just meant for the homeless man. They were a reminder to Habib himself. He's been through his own battles, both in and out of the cage. The road to becoming a UFC champion was a difficult one, marked by discipline, sacrifice, and the weight of expectations. But Habib never forgot where he came from, the struggles of his people, the hardships he witnessed as a child in the mountains of Dagestan. It taught him something important. No amount of fame or wealth compares to the importance of kindness and compassion. The homeless man, still struggling with the magnitude of what had just happened, looked at Habib with deep gratitude. His hands trembled as he clutched the business card Habib handed him. It was a simple gesture that many might have missed. The card itself was nothing special, just an ordinary business card with Habib's number written on it. But to the homeless man, it meant everything. It was proof that in the midst of all his hardships, someone cared. Someone saw him. Habib's act of kindness was not just about food or money. It was about restoring his faith in humanity. The man's voice shook as he spoke again. The words poured out in a flood. "I can't believe it. It doesn't seem real. I've been on the streets for so long. No one has ever stopped to talk to me, let alone help me like this. You didn't have to do this, but you did. You changed my life today." Habib didn't respond with words. He simply reached out, placing his hand gently on the man's shoulder. His touch was firm, but warm. It was an assurance that spoke louder than any words. "I know you're going through a difficult time," Habib said, his voice quiet and sincere. "But don't ever think you're alone in this world. You are not alone." At that moment, something changed in the homeless man's eyes. He had heard such words before, but never from a man who had everything, who had the whole world at his feet. He had seen people walk past him without a glance at him, deeming his existence irrelevant. But here was Habib, the man who had won the most hard battles in the world, sitting with him, sharing a meal and offering a moment of peace. This was not charity. It wasn't a broad gesture meant to demonstrate wealth. It was pure humanity. Dinner was over, and they both stood up. The gravity of the moment still hung in the air. Habib didn't rush him. He didn't make a grand exit. Instead, he simply said, "If you ever need anything, if you ever need help, or just someone to talk to, feel free to reach out. I'm here for you." The homeless man nodded, tears still threatening to spill. He looked at the card in his hand, his heart filled with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. It wasn't just about the money, the food, or the conversation. It was about the idea that someone as powerful and successful as Habib could take a moment to show genuine kindness to someone so far removed from his world. "I'll do it," the homeless man finally managed to say, his voice full of emotion. "I'll never forget this, Habib. You gave me more than I will ever be able to repay. You reminded me that there is still good in the world." When they parted, the homeless man walked slowly down the street. His shoulders were lighter than they had ever been in years. The weight of his hardships hadn't disappeared. But something inside him had changed. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He longer felt invisible. And Habib, as he turned leave, knew that his actions had changed not only this man's life, but his own. He saw this man as more than just a homeless man. He saw him as someone who deserved kindness and compassion. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about being a decent human being. In that quiet moment when they both separated, Habib felt a deep peace. It was a reminder that no matter how far you go in life, the impact you have on others is the true measure of your success. And sometimes the most important moments of your life aren't the ones that happen in front of cameras or fans. They're the ones when you show up just to be there for someone who needs it most. Habib's actions proved that no matter how high you rise in the world, it's how you treat the most vulnerable, forgotten, and invisible that truly defines your character. This wasn't just a story about a man asking for $1. It was a moment when compassion triumphed over glory, when humanity triumphed over indifference. Habib didn't just give the man food or money. He gave him back his dignity, his faith in people, and his and a powerful reminder that even in the most difficult times, we are never truly alone. The world may not remember all the details of that night, but for one homeless man in Moscow, that night will forever be a testament to the tremendous impact of kindness and how sometimes the smallest acts leave the biggest footprints. This story isn't just about an unexpected encounter between a famous athlete and a homeless man. It is a reminder of the power of kindness and the profound impact that one person's actions can have on the life of another. Habib's response to the homeless man's simple request wasn't just about money or food. It was about seeing the person in front of him, recognizing his humanity, his challenges, and his dignity. It was about making the choice to show compassion when others might have turned away. In a world where fame, wealth, and recognition often overshadow the true essence of human relationships, Habib's actions serve as a powerful lesson. He wasn't looking for praise, and he didn't need to be the center of attention to do the right thing. He chose to help because it was the right thing to do, and that choice was crucial in that moment. Sometimes the most significant changes don't come from grand gestures or public displays of generosity. They come from quiet, humble acts of kindness that, though not visible to many, leave a lasting impression on those who experience them. This story teaches us that no matter how big or small our actions are, they matter. We all have the ability to impact someone's life in ways we can never fully comprehend. We can make the world a little brighter, a little kinder, by taking the time to help, listen, and care. Habib's lesson is clear. Greatness is not measured by honors or wealth, but by how we treat those around us. His simple act of generosity reminds us that the true value of life lies in the relationships we build and the compassion we show to others, no matter who they are or where they come from, or where they come from, or where they come from.